I think one of the more intriguing things, and I know we've talked about this, is Bojan Bogdanovic's transformation, his maturation to a low block force in the NBA. It's been really impressive to me watching Bojan Bogdanovic change from a three-point guy, a guy that relied on the three-point game to score, now to a guy that's actually working on his footwork, back to the basket, running the floor, dunking on dudes. He actually dunked on a dude last night. Now with San Antonio, let's not get carried away. But I thought Bojan Bogdanovic was the reason that they won this game, Jake. And my question is, how does he keep this going when Donovan Mitchell and Mike Conley get back?
Yeah, I completely agree that he was the catalyst for them winning this game last night. Thought he looked great. Thought he played a great game. But in terms of him continuing to be able to do this when the boys come back, I think unfortunately for him, it's really not in his control. I think for him to be able to continue to perform at this level, it's going to take a concerted effort out of... Concerted, sorry, I say conceded. Concerted effort
You're
out
so
of...
conceited.
I know. It's going to take an effort out of Quinn Snyder and Donovan Mitchell, Mike Conley to get him the ball. I mean, that's what it's going to take. And I think, my biggest fear is that Don comes back and does what he always does, and they go right back to who they were, pre-injury, pre-time without Donovan Mitchell and Mike Conley. And so, I think, a lot of time when we talk about Quinn, we talk about the fact that, there's been some letdowns and that Quinn, is still trying to figure out how to get this team to the promised land. But I also think we got to give Quinn Snyder a lot of credit. He's had to deal with just as much adversity as the players who are actually on the floor playing the game. And I think this is just yet another small detail that he's got to figure out. How do I continue to get 25, maybe even 30 on some nights from Bogey? Because when that happens, they are definitely a better team for it. And I know we have a ton of people who always comment on the show that say, well, last year in the bubble, if they had Bogey, they would have won. All right, well, if that's the case, then let's see it this year. They're in a prime position. He's going really well. Now they just got to find the balance when Donovan Mitchell and Mike Conley come back. And if they do that, they're going to be in a great spot.
Yeah, and I also think when you start looking at balance, and I think you start looking at how Quinn Snyder is managing this roster, that's one of the things I think we need to talk about is the way that Quinn Snyder has managed minutes of his guys. I don't think there's any question that there's load management happening. We're seeing it with Rudy. We talked about it yesterday that Rudy is seeing a reduced role, a reduced load, which I think is really important. And you're seeing it with guys like Ingles. I mean, Bogey's one of the guys playing more than 30 minutes a game right now.
Yeah.
And in this stretch where I'm not going to say you have easy games because no game in the NBA in May is easy. But in this game, in this stretch where you have games that you're winning by double digits, I think it is absolutely imperative that guys like Rudy, guys like Jingles, that your heavy minute guys, Derek Favors comes to mind.
Workhorses.
Yeah, your workhorses get fewer minutes, and you need to play guys like Clarkson and Bogey heavier minutes. Jordan Clarkson is trying to find himself again. He struggled again last night. Even though he scored, his three-point shooting's gone away. And I think it's imperative that, Bojan Bogdanovic continue to get minutes playing on the block, not being reliant on that three. Mm-hmm. So I absolutely think Quinn Snyder's doing a great job managing these minutes. I also think it was interesting that Oni got a pretty good run last night. No Elias Silva really to speak of. And you're seeing that he's trying to work guys in and keep them ready to go, because I think Quinn Snyder knows you're going to need more than the 7-8 guys that you're comfortable playing. You're going to need 10, 11 guys in the playoffs, Jake, to win series.
Yeah, and I think that's why this whole thing, this whole hype around Forrest and what he's been able to do recently is blown out of proportion. I mean, everyone's talking about this kid like he's the second coming of Donovan Mitchell, and I think that we need to be really careful. I mean, he is giving, in the time that he got in the Raptor game, which obviously we went to, as we talked about yesterday, so we got to see this guy firsthand. He did look good. The shot is whack. The shot form, the way he shoots the basketball is not great. That needs a lot of work. But I thought he did a good job getting the offense going, doing his job, not making a ton of mistakes. From that aspect, he did well. But I think what we have to remember is in the postseason, what this team is going to be is, again, it's going to be Don and Mike, playing point, and then you've got Rudy in the middle. And then it's up to Quinn to build off of those three guys depending on who they're playing. So obviously it goes without saying that Bogdanovic is going to be on the floor, but then who's the fifth guy? Who is that? Are you going to start Jingles, or are you going to bring him off the bench to be a firecracker off the bench? Like what is the mindset in a postseason series? So right now you're totally right. When they're playing the Spurs and these teams that they should really beat, yeah, we should be giving more minutes to guys like, Forrest and Oni and Matt Thomas. How nice would it be? Think about this. How nice would it be to have Matt Thomas come off the bench and give you 10 or 12 points in a postseason game? How nice would that be? I mean that's the kind of guy that you got to develop right now so you can get those contributions in the postseason. And I think that Quinn's working hard to do that. The problem is these guys are a little bit too far away from a development standpoint to be in a great position to contribute something meaningful this postseason. That's the issue.
Yeah, and I also think there's something to this conversation that, by the way, Donovan Mitchell hasn't played in 10 days, and you're starting to see that this team's identity is changing a bit. They've become far less reliant on the three ball to win games, and that's probably a good thing because you're seeing a guy like Bogey is struggling with this wrist injury. I'm not trying to hit the panic button because he certainly is contributing right now. I think over the last, 3 games, he has been a dominant force on the block. Certainly against Toronto now and San Antonio, Bojan Bogdanovic has absolutely had his way down there. But what are you watching with him? You're noticing he's not fist bumping with his right hand. You're noticing that he's constantly flexing, rolling the wrist, playing with the wrist. It's not. I'm not going to say it's a problem for him, but it very clearly is an issue for Bojan Bogdanovic.
Yeah, it feels like one of those, quote unquote, if we call it an injury, it feels like one of those nagging, discomfort kind of situations. I don't know if anybody can relate to this, but it's like a kid when you're rolling around and you roll up on your wrist and all of a sudden it's sore for a few days, and you're kind of dealing with that. And, as an NBA player, you got to shoot the three at a high rate if you're Bogey. That this whole paint game was born from him in those shooting woes that he had in the middle stretch of the season. Quinn wanted him, in my opinion, to see the ball go through the hoop. That's what he wanted. And all of a sudden, once you start playing that way, you see, hey, there's this big opportunity. If Bogdanovic can play on the block, if he could somehow mature into a player that isn't just solely focused on scoring from the block, let's say, yes, he did score, but then he could also distribute a little bit from the block. Okay, now you've got options. Now we're talking about a guy who is a 2, maybe even 3-dimensional player on the floor for you.
Yes.
And I like that aspect. I like that a lot because if I can have, Bogey on the block, and then, we see this with all the great teams, right? We see it with LeBron. We see it with KD. We see it with all the great players. They play from the block, and they distribute out. If they can get that kind of a dynamic with Rudy Gobert rebounding, I do think that is a nice recipe for success.
Yeah, and I also think the other thing that you have to look at is that the Jazz as a whole are struggling to shoot the three. This has been going on for a couple of weeks now, where last night they're 11 of 36 from three for 30%. You add 2 of 7 out of Bogey, 3 of 6 out of Niang, 2 of 7 out of Jingles, 2 of 10 out of Jordan Clarkson. That, when you look at these wins, there's a lot of good storylines, don't get me wrong. But the one thing I think you have to really wonder is, when does this three-point shot come back around? Because I still think, and even though that they've made kind of their game over and they've realized that you got to get to the paint, their identity is that of a three-point shooting team. And it should be. They have so many guys that, I still think Joe Ingles is one of the best three-point shooters in basketball right now.
Would you start him, or would you bring him off the bench in the postseason? Not right now, in the postseason.
I think he's probably a bench guy. Because I think you need his production and his defense off the bench, and I think Joe is not a young buck anymore. Mm-hmm. Every minute that he plays is. It's got to be meaningful. I think you need Joe Ingles to do what he did last night, which was struggle. But then it doesn't matter because he's going to keep shooting. He hits He hits a 3 in the fourth to really extend the lead and kind of end the game.
Yeah.
At that point, I think they were up 15 or whatever. He hits that 3 and the game's over.
Yeah.
right? That's Joe Ingles. He hits big shots. He could be 0 of 10, the 11th shot's going in, right? And I think that's what Joe Ingles, he's so important to this lineup, and I think I like the way they're load managing him, but I would bring him off the bench. I mean, if the 3 starters who they're going to be.
Yeah.
And really, all 5 of them. You know that it's going to be Conley, Don, Rudy, Royce, and Bogey. Mm-hmm. Those are your 5 starters. I have no problem with that. The question is, are you going to be able to get, look at the performance out of Rudy last night. I mean, you get 24 points, 15 boards, 2 steals, 3 blocks, filling up the stat sheet.
Yeah.
You would expect that against Jakob Poeltl and the San Antonio Spurs.
I want that kind of production against the best bigs. That's what I want. I want him to play again, to go back to the Philly game, just because it's Joel and it's a good example. When we were going and heading up into that game, I was really hoping to see a physical brand of basketball out of Rudy Gobert in terms of rebounding, in terms of getting forcing the issue on Joel. Because that is within the game. The game within the game, if you're Rudy Gobert, is if I'm playing Jokic, if I'm playing Joel, if I'm playing Karl Anthony Towns, any of the elite bigs that we have in this league, if I'm playing Anthony Davis, let's say, my mission should be to get them in foul trouble. I want to dominate them to a level where they have to foul me, and then they have to go sit their ass on the bench. And if I can get that done, that perhaps is the best contribution that I could ever give this team, because now what does that do? That opens up the paint. That allows me to rebound at a higher level. That just helps everything. But we don't get that out of Rudy, and that's one thing that I'm curious about headed into the postseason. Does his mindset change from constantly complaining to the officials and constantly being this guy that is just a nuisance, obnoxious?
But by the way, that's becoming a team-wide thing. I mean, I think you're starting to see. I mean, Bogey lobbying the officials during timeouts. Joe Ingles has always been a very diplomatic, communicator with the officials. But you're starting to see that it's every single play.
Yeah.
Rudy and Bogdanovic are on the officials.
Well, and there was one point during the Raptor game where Quinn had called a timeout. You've got Quinn talking to an official. You had Clarkson talking to an official, and you had Rudy talking to an official. And the guy Rudy was talking to is a G League official because of the officiating situation. So that's why I say, you're totally right. Maybe it is just a team-wide thing that
it's too much.
Yeah, I mean,
honestly, it's too much.
Yeah.
But here nor there, I think the biggest issue is for the Jazz is how do you keep Bogey going at this rate? Because I think it's really important that they get a low post presence. How do you keep him going at this rate when you get Conley and Don back? Because obviously Donovan Mitchell is the straw that stirs the drink. I mean, when he comes back, it cannot go back to Don and everybody else.
Do you think it will, though?
I do. That's my biggest fear, is that you're seeing the Suns play this well-rounded team game where the Suns are getting contributions from 3, 4, 5 guys. You're seeing the Nuggets getting contributions from 3 guys. You're seeing the Lakers last night somehow beat the Nuggets, and they get 5 guys in double figures against one of the best teams in the West. You're looking at the Knicks. You're all of these teams have 2, 3 guys. The Jazz in crunch time turn into Donovan and everybody else.
Right.
And it's something that you really need to pay attention to. Already a lot of people commenting. Brandon Whiteside, good morning to you. Tell me that the Suns minus Booker and Paul would be able to put together what the Jazz are doing now. They would. Against the competition the Jazz are facing, they would. I mean, Toronto without Kyle Lowry, with an injured, Van Vliet, without Gary Trent, without, a lot of their guys, they would. The Spurs are very clearly not on, and it depends on the night because of the way they play. The Spurs are not a very good team.
Yeah.
I mean, but if you look at how the Jazz are winning, it's that they're playing a volume of guys, and you're getting a kind of a transformative performance out of Bogdanovic.
Mm-hmm.
But you're watching the games that they lose. They lost by 21 to Phoenix. So am I supposed to be impressed that you're pounding teams like San Antonio? No, you should. And that tells you you're a good basketball team. If the Suns were without Devin Booker and without Chris Paul, I think they'd beat the Spurs. That's just my opinion. At home, I think they'd beat the Spurs.
Yeah.
I think if the Jazz were fully healthy and the Suns were without Chris Paul and Devin Booker, the Jazz would win by 21. But I don't, and this is the other thing that I think is interesting is I don't think these are special performances. It's the San Antonio Spurs, who are not very good. You look at that team; they're turnover machines. Jakob Poeltl's just he's not a number one big in this league.
Yeah,
and I think you're getting good performances out of guys like Rudy Gay, DeMar DeRozan. That's all well and good, but other than that, obviously Dejounte Murray is a nice player, but they don't. The Spurs aren't intimidating anymore.
They don't have anything that scares you. There's nothing there that you can't handle.
Yeah. So I'm not saying that what the Sun or what the Jazz are doing is poor. I mean, I think they did exactly what you wanted them to do last night. They came out and dominated.
I mean, I guess here's the thing. Are we supposed to sit here and say that last night was some great performance? Like yeah, they handled their business. Rudy did what Rudy should have done. I think that's what I'm saying. Again, I don't mean to hold a contract over the guy's head, but if you're a $200 million player, I expect 20 and 15 out of you. That's as a big, especially as a big who is so consistently in the paint and focused on rebounding, I would expect 20 cleanup points and 15 boards. That's that is not unrealistic. It's not. I mean, you're literally talking about Embiid going against the Jazz. I think he did 40 and 25 or something ridiculous like that. So 20 and 15 is not some astronomical performance. That's what it should be.
I think that's what you would expect. Last night is what you would expect out of Rudy when the opposing team's big. It's what happened against Toronto. Toronto doesn't have bigs. I look at the games that this team loses more than I look at the games that this team wins. And if you go up and down the losses, how do you explain losing to Minnesota, who's one of the worst teams in the NBA? Well, because they're coming together and they're playing well, and
they've got a productive big.
I look at the loss to Phoenix. I mean, that's without Donovan Mitchell and Mike Conley. You would expect that loss. I mean, I go back to the Laker loss. That was a little surprising. But you chose not to play your guys and you load managed and you lost that game. The loss to the Wizards, same thing. These wins and losses are predictable. There was a guy on YouTube yesterday who was all upset saying that, all we do is bring the negative. And I don't usually read a lot of YouTube comments post haste. But I look at some of these, it's some of the feelings. Like his name is Randy East. He says, just for the record, I did some backtracking on your podcast. I really lost count of the number of programs where you guys let off on disrespecting the Jazz. Well, how is it disrespecting? And so I said, where exactly were we wrong? The Jazz have essentially followed the script we wrote for them in January all the way to losing to Phoenix. It's not hating when it's the truth.
Yeah.
And his answer was, well, those are your facts, Monty, not NBA facts. And it's okay, I'll say this to Brandon, I'll say this to Tyler, to Will, to all of our most passionate Jazz fans. You can say that I'm a hater or that we're haters, but where have we been wrong about this team?
Where have we misled you?
And I just think when you look at where they are, this is a great win last night because they dominated. They did exactly what you would expect. You got another big performance out of Bojan Bogdanovic. It's exactly what this team needed. You're doing exactly what you should be doing. You're not doing anything special. You're not doing anything over the top. You're not doing anything that any other team isn't doing. But it's important now that you get every win possible because the Suns have a distinctly more difficult schedule. And I think with the Nuggets loss last night in Los Angeles, it pretty much eliminates them as a factor in the West. I think it is the Suns and the Jazz, and I think the Jazz are going to win the Western Conference. I think the Jazz are going to have home court advantage throughout because I think the Suns have a very difficult schedule, and frankly, the Jazz do not. Now, obviously, there are other factors in that. What's going on with Donovan Mitchell?
Right.
How long is Mike Conley going to be out? Because this is nothing. He's injured. Mike Conley is injured now. This is not load management. This is not rest. Mike Conley hurt his hamstring, and he's not able to play right now. How long is that going to go on? You have, 10 days, 12 days left in the season? There's no longer time. Look at what's going on in Los Angeles with LeBron.
Yeah.
If you look at LeBron James right now, this guy's hurt. He's not injured. He's hurt. He cannot play. He tried. He missed the game last night because he's got residual ankle soreness. I mean, this guy almost broke his leg. And I think a lot of people don't realize that. A high ankle sprain essentially is 1 millimeter from a leg break. 1 millimeter from a leg break. And I look at LeBron trying to come back. The guy was in a boot the next day after he played. He was limping up and down the floor. LeBron's not ready to play. But why is he pushing? Because he realizes that team needs him. And I'll say this about the Lakers, especially from last night. I actually think right now, today, on May the 4th be with you, the Lakers are better off without LeBron James.
Okay, you're going to have to explain why, because people are going to call you crazy.
Well, I mean, you can call me crazy if you want. He's not capable of producing right now.
Yeah.
This is not a guy that can play at the rim. This is not a guy that I would think can hit a consistent jump shot. He's on one leg, and it's not a knee, it's an ankle. Yeah, I mean, he has no mobility. He was a liability defensively.
Yeah.
I just don't see when you're getting contributions, and I mean deep contributions. Again, Talon Horton-Tucker last night. I look at the way that he as THC has played. I mean, he's nothing short of sensational for them off the bench. I look at Caruso starting 28 minutes, 11 points. You get 10 out of Caldwell Pope. You get 25 out of AD. You get 10 out of Gasol. You only had to play Montrezl Harrell 10 minutes last night.
Nice.
Right? I mean, Talon Horton-Tucker again.
Yeah.
They're
balanced.
He gives you double digits.
Yeah, they have depth.
They're getting contributions from the deep. Why are you rushing LeBron James back?
Yeah, I think that this question looms for many teams right now, which is how much should we care about seeding? So, like, for the Jazz, with Mike Conley and Donovan Mitchell, how bad do you want the 1 seed? How much do you care about having the 1 seed? I would tell you that this team needs to have home court advantage throughout to have a shot to make the NBA Finals. I think that's just a necessary thing for them. And I part ways on the whole thing about the Suns not having a great shot to win the West or whatever. Like, to me, again, I'll just keep saying I think the Suns are a battle-tested team. I think they do not care about going on the road and playing a good team at their
better
building.
on the road.
Yeah, so like I think this team is more. If there was ever going to be a team that could get this mission done with the difficult schedule that's left, it would be this Suns team. However, it does need to be said. It is very easy for any team, Jazz, Suns, Lakers, whoever, to have a mental lapse and lose an important game that they really need to win to lock that up. So, yes, I do acknowledge that the schedule is a factor, but I just think that these two teams are very even right now. And I think that the Jazz need to get these guys back as soon as possible, because I don't like the prospect of heading into the postseason. Like having these two guys sit out and then bringing them back for a postseason series, that can't happen. That can't be a reality.
Yeah, Micah wants to know, is it the same thing losing Conley and Mitchell as Booker and Paul? It's not, and I didn't want to argue with Brandon on this. I don't think you can compare those two. I think if you want to talk about losing Donovan and Rudy, okay, cool. Now, your two best players on this Jazz roster are Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert. The two best players on the Suns are Chris Paul and Devin Booker. If you want to go man for man, sure. Mike Conley, and I can only say this so many different ways.
Yeah.
Mike Conley is not, in my opinion, one of your top 3 best players on this team. I think that's Rudy, Donovan, and Bogdanovic. And I think Joe Ingles is in the conversation. I think Mike Conley's a really important player when Donovan Mitchell's out. When Donovan Mitchell is playing, I think it minimizes, and it's unfortunate because he's a superstar, and I think Conley and Bogdanovic are just not on that level to be able to play through that. They don't shine nearly as much when Donovan's in the lineup.
Mm-hmm.
Rudy Gobert is always going to get his because he's just bigger, stronger, longer than most guys. I look at the Jazz, and I'm telling you now, Donovan's their best player. I think Rudy's number 2, and I think Bogdanovic is number 3. And that's why I keep saying it's really imperative that they figure out how to keep Bojan Bogdanovic playing at this level. Or, excuse me, Bojan Bogdanovic. playing at this level.
Yeah.
That's really important.
Yeah.
I think that's huge. Ian says, I don't think it's fair to equate losing Book and Paul to Don and Conley. Yeah, I agree with that. James Knight says the same Spurs team minus DeRozan and Pirtle the night before should have beaten Philly. No, they shouldn't have. Like what? And James, if you want to explain that, please do. Because I don't.
Yeah, I don't really understand.
I don't understand that
there.
comment. Marcus says, always defending the Jazz. I don't understand. I am a Clippers fan, and I know as well as anybody, superstars don't always perform. And when they're out of the lineup, you start to appreciate them. The Jazz without Donovan Mitchell are not the same Jazz team. Why is that so hard to say? I don't think Jazz fans are struggling to say you're not the same without Donovan. I think what Jazz fans struggle to say is that guys like Royce O'Neal, Bojan Bogdanovic, the guys that you're seeing carry heavy load right now, like, again, whether it's Trent Forrest or Jordan Clarkson, these guys are not the world's greatest players.
But to Jazz fans, they are. And that's
I think
the difference.
that's the struggle. I think Jazz fans want to say that, Rudy Gobert should be in the MVP conversation. Actually, he shouldn't. I mean, you have to have a consistent ability to control the game on both ends. And a lot of people are pointing to, his stop in the second quarter, I think it was, where the Spurs were on the break and Rudy essentially froze them out of the paint.
Mm-hmm.
That's his job. That's what he does, and he does it very well. And then what? Because against the very top competition, Giannis Antetokounmpo has found a jumper. Who are the other MVP candidates? If
Julius Randle, Steph Curry.
I mean, Julius Randle's the most improved player in the NBA.
Easily.
Right? I mean, he's a big that can shoot threes and has a mid-range. I look at, if I had to put other names out there, obviously I think Joel Embiid is there. He dominated Rudy. I look at Steph Curry. His performance last night was nothing short of sensational. Luka Doncic, where are the Mavericks without Luka? And how he's doing what he's doing with all that junk in the trunk and his hot mom, I have no idea. But he continues to dominate the NBA. I thank you for the charity chuckle. He continues to dominate the NBA, and I look at Rudy Gobert and know he shouldn't be in the MVP conversation.
Yeah,
I think you have a bunch of role players that facilitate Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert.
Yeah.
Rudy Gobert's, and this is, again, something that's hard for Jazz fans to get away from. Rudy Gobert is at his best when the three ball's not going in for the Jazz. And defensively, absolutely, he should be Defensive Player of the Year.
I think, though, too, that play you're talking about last night in the game, in the San Antonio game, where he stops their fast break and they back out and everything. That play should not thrust him into the MVP conversation. You want to use that play to justify Defensive Player of the Year. Okay, I could kind of see the logic there. But I think, the MVP, to me, should be reserved for somebody who isn't just a defensive stalwart. It should be reserved for somebody who can contribute in every facet of the game. And that's what I really struggle with Rudy, whether we're talking MVP, whether we're talking just his overall impact on a game. Teams have figured this out. It's no secret now how to beat the Utah Jazz.
When they're fully healthy.
Yeah, it's no secret.
It's no secret.
Yeah, and that's why I say, when this team is fully healthy and they're playing, we had a Clipper fan in the comments, when they're playing a fully healthy Clipper team, or let's say that LeBron comes back and is 100% healthy and the normal LeBron and Anthony Davis combo we've come to love, when they're playing those teams, I just think NBA teams are not dumb. Everybody has tape. Everybody can see what they're supposed to do to exploit the weaknesses of the Jazz or any team that they're playing. And that's why I'm telling you guys, with Rudy Gobert, yes, he's a hell of a defensive player. He's a force on that end of the floor.
Yes.
But offensively, the Jazz are playing 4-on-5. It's that simple. Rudy Gobert is nothing on offense except a cleanup player who sets some picks. That's what he does. And in the postseason, that's just not going to be good enough.
Yeah, and hey, I hope we're completely wrong about the Jazz winning an NBA championship this year, because I don't think it's possible. I hope I'm completely wrong about that. I hope that, I look at I think Denver's a very difficult out. I think the Clippers are going to be a very difficult out. I look at the bottom of the Western Conference. There's not an easy series in the conference. There's not.
I think that Jazz fans really want to say, well, we've put together this unbelievable regular season. How are you guys now saying that we're not going to get to the NBA Finals? And it's like, what you have to understand as a Jazz fan and therefore as an NBA fan is that in the postseason, you're playing half-court matchup games. That's what you're playing in the postseason. And so the weaknesses of players get exposed heavily. And that's why I'm saying you should be concerned about Denver. Even without Jamal Murray, you should be concerned about Denver.
Well, look at the matchup in a Denver series. I mean, if you look at Rudy Gobert having to check Nikola Jokic, the NBA MVP to be, in my opinion. You look at Nikola Jokic, he shoots the three, he finishes inside, he makes his free throws, and he's a really good passer. Like, he is one of the most impactful assist men in the NBA. If you go and look at the numbers, he assists on fully 40% of the Denver Nuggets baskets. 40%. I think he's fourth in the NBA in that number. The three people ahead of him are all point guards. You look at Nikola Jokic, he is an elite big. There's no doubt about it. And what does that do? If you're the Jazz and you're going head-to-head with the Nuggets, you have to respect his three ball. So Rudy's got to play above the free throw line when he is checking Nikola Jokic, right? That gap has to be tighter. He's an elite passer, and now it comes down to man for man. Who's going to stop Michael Porter Jr.? I don't see an athlete enough on that roster right now. Are you going to put Donovan Mitchell on Michael Porter Jr.?
No, it'd be Royce, I think.
I think it has to be Royce.
Yeah, it'd be Royce.
Okay, well then who are you going to put on Aaron Gordon?
Bogdanovic.
And Aaron Gordon's going to win that matchup.
Yeah.
And what they're showing you is when they play matchup basketball every single night in Denver. So there are nights where Aaron Gordon plays 20 minutes and scores 5 points. There are nights where Aaron Gordon plays 20 minutes and scores 27 points. It's all based on the matchup that night. Guys like their two best players right now are Nikola Jokic and Michael Porter Jr.
Yeah.
They're getting theirs. It doesn't matter who they are and who they're playing and who's across from them.
And Michael Porter's come along leaps and bounds, man.
That three ball is nothing but net. If you look at Nuggets highlights, and if you're a Jazz fan, you better respect it because Michael Porter Jr. is going to impact that series if they wind up running into each other.
Who, if you're the Jazz, who do you want to see? I mean, ideally, who would you want to see? I think that, and I'm not talking about the first round. I mean, the first round you should win. That really shouldn't even be a question. But I'm talking about in the Western Conference. Once you get to the second round, your NBA Finals run has begun. So
there's nobody that's going to be a good matchup in the West. I mean, like if I look at the standings right now, if it ended today, 1 through 8, it would be the Jazz versus Golden State. I mean, I think you would take the Jazz in that series.
I would take the Jazz in that series.
But again, when you have Steph Curry on your team,
causing trouble,
you're never out of any game. And in a 7-game series, I don't know that you have a guy. I mean, Mike Conley plays pretty good defense. He knocked over Eric Bledsoe last night. Like, he literally dropped him. Eric Bledsoe was standing a foot away from Steph. Steph gave him a hezzy, and Bledsoe fell over. I mean, he is playing unbelievable basketball. Jazz win that series. Look at, you don't want Portland. You don't want Dallas. You certainly don't want Dallas. I think Dallas, they make threes in the way that Porzingis and Luka are playing together. I mean, you're better than Dallas, but you know what the Dallas series is for the Jazz? It's one that wears you out.
Yeah. It's a high energy series.
It wears your ass out. Yeah. That needs to be a 5-game series max.
Like, to me, you want to beat the Warriors, and then, I mean, you would want Dallas over Portland. You would, because I think Portland is deeper. Portland's way deeper.
Portland's a problem.
Yeah, so like I would want to see Dallas, and then after that, I mean, the road is just gets much tougher.
Once you get to the semis, forget about it.
Yeah,
I mean, there is no easy. I don't know who you would want. I would think you would want Golden State.
Yeah,
I would think Ja Morant showed. That he's a problem for them to match up with, and now they have Jaren Jackson back.
Yeah.
He's giving them good.
Who
I don't
plays
know.
really good pick and roll.
I
by
don't
the
know
way.
that there's an easy matchup for the Jazz at this point. There are no easy matchups.
Yeah.
I think you would want Golden State over Dallas.
Yeah.
But we'll see. I mean, Lakers Nuggets in round one potentially.
That's huge for the Jazz that matchup's happening because
You better be a Laker fan at that point.
Yeah.
Because you don't want the Nuggets. I'm telling you.
Yeah. I don't know. I can see potential issues in both series. Like I think that this particular year you'd probably want to face the Lakers over the Nuggets, but I think that overall for this Jazz team, I also think that there's this side of this conversation where the Jazz definitely control their fate. So what I mean is that earlier in the show today we've talked about how when Don and Mike come back, what does that do to Bogdanovic?
Yes.
Does that cut his production down? Do they make an effort to keep feeding him the ball? Like what do they do? So let's just assume that they keep feeding him. You're getting 25 out of Bogey. You're getting 25 to 30 out of Don. You're getting 15 to 20 out of Mike. Rudy's getting his 15 to 20 and 10 to 15 boards.
You'll never lose a game.
You won't lose a game if that happens.
Ever.
The problem is that I think that Bogey, one way or the other, it's not to blame anybody, but one way or the other in a postseason series will be minimized. And I think when NBA games get to a certain point in the postseason, superstars take over. Superstars do what they do, which is to mean that Donovan Mitchell is definitely going to take more of the ball. So I think it's almost inevitable that Bogdanovic's touches go down. And I don't know what you do with that per se. Like, I don't know how you battle
I don't know either. Will says, I appreciate you guys keeping it real from a fan's perspective. I think what you undervalue is Rudy's impact offensively. You never talk about the screens he set, and you never talk about how much he cleans up and provides second opportunities. We talk about that.
Did I not just mention that like 10 minutes ago?
All the time we talk about that.
But I'm not trying to be a hater here. Like, how long have you been listening today? Like, I just talked about that. Like, I mentioned it 10 minutes ago. Like, I just said that the Jazz are playing 4-on-5 offensively because all Rudy does is set screens. Now, I will say those are really good screens, and frankly, they're illegal screens that he gets away with consistently, and I love that part of his game. I love the fact that he's constantly setting moving picks and they never call it. I love that because that's a massive advantage. That gets Don and Mike and everybody else using those screens really good looks.
But what have you noticed that's gone away from the Jazz arsenal? The Rudy alley-oop, the lob to Rudy has gone away.
Yeah, they don't play pick and roll with they just play pick. They don't play roll. like that's just what it is. So, and the other thing too is like the ball movement when Don and Mike come back, will the ball movement be consistent? Will that stay in their game? Because right now it's pretty good. Right now they're moving the ball a lot and they're getting looks. But I just think that, for this person, that comment you just read, dude, like I just talked about the fact that he is a cleanup guy and he sets picks. That's what he does. That's his entire existence on offense. And I'm saying that limits and puts the Jazz in a position where they're playing 4-on-5 offensively.
Will replied and said, but you guys are also the same show that says they'll be better off in the future without Rudy.
They will.
I don't see how that's possible. Well, but that's my point, is that if you can't see how Rudy limits them offensively, as much as he facilitates things, the high pick and roll when Don and Conley are healthy, the high pick and roll is a weapon. I totally get that. You cannot give him the ball. They will not give him the ball. And it's because he doesn't have post moves. He has a little lob up to the, throw it up to the basket, or he is not an offensive player. He is a guy that does one thing really well. He dunks really well. And you're limited in that. And I think if you look at the best teams in the NBA, you have to at least come to the point that Rudy Gobert is limited offensively.
Think of it this way: put yourself in the shoes of, let's say the Jazz and the Nuggets are matching up, right? And you're Nikola Jokic and you're playing defense on Rudy Gobert. Think about this. Seriously, take a hard thought about this. When you're playing defense and you don't have to even think twice about the guy you're defending taking a shot and making that consistently, that allows you to play defense on another guy while you're defending Rudy Gobert. And that's why I say offensively, you're never going to see a big, when Rudy's setting screens, when Rudy has the ball at the top of the key, because you'll see that a lot. The Jazz do that almost very consistently. Like 80% of their possessions, Rudy Gobert is going to have the ball at the top of the key, and the guards are running around, working the offense. When he's at the top of the key, don't watch Rudy. Watch the defender, what he's doing. Because 9 times out of 10, that defender is going to sag a little deeper into the paint, and he's going to make sure that the back cut doesn't get open. And then once it leaves Rudy's hand, then he's gonna come back to Rudy, and he's going to lock back up with him. I'm telling you guys, go on YouTube, watch Rudy Gobert's offensive game, and come back to this show and tell us that we're wrong or that we're undervaluing what he does. Because I'm telling you right now, we watch every game. We know his game. I can tell you all about what he can do and what he can't do, and he does not have anything else besides a screen and rebounding and cleaning up. That's all he does, and that's why they're at a disadvantage.
Yeah. And again, I just point to the Lakers with or without Anthony Davis. Mm-hmm. They're fine without LeBron. They're a playoff team without LeBron. They're not a playoff team without Anthony Davis. Forgotten Soul says, whenever I see a fellow Jazz fan saying Rudy should be in the MVP conversation, I'm embarrassed. Makes us fans delusional. I don't think it's delusional. I just think you're not keeping that real. And Forgotten Souls, I think you have a really good point there. Brandon Whiteside says MVP is Paul. Taking a lotto team to a top 2 seed, he's the MVP. Most Jazz fans know we have a bunch of G Leaguers with our top players. We aren't a perennial lotto team. Well, you used to be. I mean, think about if you go back to the mid-teens. I mean, how many? No, I'm not doing the draft.
Let me pose this question.
I swear I'm not going to talk about the Utah
Don't
Jazz
talk draft,
but
let me just pose this question, okay? Because I do agree that Chris Paul has a strong case. I do agree with that comment. Think of it this way, though. What would you rather be? Would you rather be year in and year out a lottery team? Or would you rather be what the Jazz have been, which is a 5 or 6 seed trying to be a 1 or 2 seed?
On the cusp of being relevant.
And you just can't get over the hump.
No.
It's difficult. I'm telling you, it's a miserable thing. It's a miserable thing.
This makes me crazy.
Well,
because I'm telling you, to go out in the first round back-to-back years is worse than being a lotto team. Because if you are not in the lottery, you are not getting that top young talent. But again, the Jazz have blown so many Dante Exum picks that I can't even, like Trey Lyles or, I mean, do you realize Donovan Mitchell's not even your draft pick? You traded with Denver to get him. And it makes me crazy that Jazz fans want to rewrite draft history. You have been a perennial lottery team. The Utah Jazz have been a perennial lottery team. Now, once you made the Donovan Mitchell trade, that all came to an end, which the front office, Dennis Lindsay and company deserve incredible credit for. But don't sit here and say that this team hasn't been a perennial lottery team, because they have. And they have blown a ton. I mean, look at Gordon. Look at Enes Kanter. Look at Derek Favors. Look, like, you've had so many groupings of players that just haven't worked.
Yeah.
And again, it's the same thing I told you in the past. Paying Gordon Hayward would have been a mistake, right? But Gordon Hayward was your guy because you missed on so many picks.
And the fans were in love with him.
Yeah. JC says Lakers are done. Won't be healthy enough during the play-in tournament. Totally agree.
Yeah.
Lakers are in real trouble. And I think when you look at their reliance it's not reliance on LeBron. I think when you look at the Lakers want to be reliant on LeBron.
Yeah.
That's a mistake. He's hurt. Let him be hurt.
Yeah.
Give this team to Anthony Davis, because if you're truly going to stay at the top of the Western Conference, Anthony Davis has to be the center of your existence. Give the team to Anthony Davis.
Yeah.
Let guys like KCP, let guys like Kyle Kuzma. Again, Kyle Kuzma, great draft pick. I think they traded the wrong guy. I'd have traded Kuzma and kept Lonzo Ball, just my opinion. But I think you have to get more out of guys like that.
Yep.
And Talon Horton-Tucker and Caruso and KCP, this Dennis Schroeder thing. Now Dennis Schroeder is in the health and safety protocol. He's probably out a minimum of 10 days. Another huge loss for the Lakers.
Yeah.
He's likely out the rest of the regular season. Dennis Schroeder's a huge part of what they do on both ends of the floor. The Lakers, it's just not their year with the injuries, and now this thing.
By the way, you won the championship last year.
Yeah.
Hey, you can take a year off.
Yes.
So I agree. And by the way, probably not on today's show, but at some point, maybe after the season, we got to start talking about how many years LeBron has left, because I think this injury is really starting to bring that to the forefront for him. And I think we're definitely under, I think it's probably 2 seasons left, like legit. I think it's probably 2 seasons.
With what?
like in his career. I don't know that
okay.
he's got 5 more years left. I don't see that.
Yeah, it's so hard to stay healthy later in your career. I mean,
Yeah.
we've seen this movie 1,000 times.
Yeah.
It's so hard to stay healthy. Swiderski says, "What about the LA Lakers in pre-tournament?"
What do you mean?
I think he means in the play-in. I just don't see that they'll win. They'll win whoever their playing game is. They'll win. Anthony Davis will win that on his own. I just don't see how they match up with anybody at the top of the Western Conference.
They're not going to the NBA Finals.
They're not.
This is not happening. I mean, they're going to lose at some point.
They don't match up at all with the Suns. They certainly don't match up at all with the Jazz. I mean, if you're the Jazz, I think you want the Lakers or the Golden State Warriors. I mean, I think that's what you would be pointed at. James Knight says, all the postseason speculation is getting tiresome. Bring on the playoffs. Yeah, it wears me out.
Yeah.
I mean, it wears me out. Everybody's in on Nikola Jokic being the MVP, including Swiderski says Joker's the MVP. I agree. Marcio says you guys are completely underrating Nikola Jokic. I think everybody underrates him.
Do you guys actually like listen to the show, like the things that we say?
Well, I'd assume he's not talking about us because I just sat here and slurped Nikola Jokic for 5 minutes. Are you kidding me? I just, it's going to be interesting. The whole thing is going to be very interesting. I think by the way, we're not even talking about the Eastern Conference. I mean,
what's to talk about? It's 2 teams.
What are the Nets doing?
It's 2 teams.
What are the Nets doing? I don't.
They're just chilling. They're chilling. I mean,
any team that believes that they can hit some switch and become elite,
listen,
you're asking for trouble.
I know you're asking for trouble, but I'm just telling you, like, even if James doesn't play, Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving together is just a lethal combination, and I think that you're seeing, they lose the Bucks game, and Kevin Durant gives you, I think, 39, right around that 40 number. He's back, he's ready, and I think that the Nets, yes, I agree, it would be nice to see them kind of take that conference and run with it. But
by the way, Mr. Mitch wants to know why we're not talking about Julius Randle for MVP. I think he should absolutely be in the discussion. I mean, here are my MVPs. Number 1, I think, is Nikola Jokic. Number 2, it's really difficult for me. I can make a case for CP3, but I think
it's not happening, dude.
I don't think that's happening.
That's not happening.
I think, who do I think will finish second? I think it'll be Giannis because he's one of the most overrated players in the NBA. He gets a ton of votes. I actually think Joel Embiid should be in the conversation at 2.
Yeah.
I think Steph Curry should be number 2 in the MVP. If it were me, I would go Jokic number 1 by far, not close, runaway train. I think I would go Steph number 2, and I think I'd go Julius Randle number 3. I think what Julius Randle has meant to the New York Knicks, and his improvement.
How much of it is the fact that it's the Knicks?
I don't think a lot of it has to do with it being the Knicks. I think it has to do with the fact that Julius Randle is an unstoppable force, and you have no way to defend him because the 3-ball he hit out of the corner last night
that was so
that
nice,
goes
dude.
over the corner of the backboard. I mean, that's not a shot that any other big in this league is making.
Yeah,
I mean, he is a guy that has gone from a rim runner, because that's what Julius Randle was after he got back from the broken foot with the Lakers. He was a rim runner.
Yeah,
he's gone from a guy that's a rim runner. He lost a ton of weight. He's worked on his jumper with Chris Brickley, and he's turned into an all-around player. And by the way, he's actually really good on the defensive end as well. I think Julius Randle is not going to get many MVP votes. He should, though.
Yeah.
He absolutely should. Niall Gardner says Monty MVP. Yeah, I'm the MVP for everybody.
Hey.
I think we all know that.
Yeah.
Right? Ian says CP top 5. Yeah, Chris Paul's top 5 for sure.
Yeah.
This is a franchise that hadn't been relevant in 12 years.
Yeah, I'd be going Jokic, Curry, CP3, and then everybody else. Those are the 3 guys that I feel like have really taken their teams to the next level. I feel like with Joel, his team would be in the conversation with or without him. I think we all know that he's one of the best in the league, but I think that hurts his case a little bit because with Chris Paul, the Suns are not anything without Chris Paul.
Yeah.
And then I think with Steph, if Steph is hurt, that team is a dumpster fire. So
Swiderski says, "What about Donovan Mitchell if the Jazz stay number one?" Well, they will have stayed number one without him.
Yeah.
So I think that actually hurts his case. Now, if they had dropped to like 4 without him, okay,
and then he came back and took him to 1.
maybe
okay,
that
then,
shows some more value.
Then you
I don't
got
know.
some story there.
Jim says, "What about Luka?" Well, as Giggity said, Luka's mom is the MVP. Appreciate you, Giggity. I think Luka's in. Certainly in the future, I think he's going to win an MVP. I just think right now he's not on a top team, and I think the top teams have some real special performances going on, and I think that when I look at I think Chris Paul's way more of an MVP candidate than Luka is.
Agreed. Yeah.
I don't.
He
I don't
makes
think
that
there's-
team go. I mean, Chris Paul makes that team go, no doubt.
Timmy says, "What do you guys think about the Celtics? That was odd, those two running into each other." Well, that was Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum running into each other the other night. I don't know what to think about the Celtics. I think the Boston Celtics are a huge disappointment.
Mm-hmm.
I think they are going to go out very quietly because I don't think they can beat the Bucks, the Nets, the Knicks, the Sixers. I don't think they're on par with those teams.
Mm-hmm.
And I think unlike the if I look up and down the standings in the East, I don't see a lot of depth in the East.
Yeah, I think the thing with the Celtics is they don't have enough to win, but they have just enough to be relevant. You know what I mean? Like they have just enough to be in the picture, but they don't have enough to do anything substantial. And I don't even know that this is a Brad Stevens problem. Like I feel like this team post Kyrie Irving, like ever since then, has just been missing the it factor. Everybody likes to compare Jason Tatum and Devin Booker and their situations and them trying to bring their team to the next level. And I got to tell you, since Chris Paul's gotten there, that's made Devin Booker a better player, and that's why they're doing things. But for Boston, I feel like they need a rebirth of this squad. They need like either a big name to come in who's not a malcontent.
Have you heard about this Kemba to the Clippers stuff? I mean, if they truly, with all due respect to Brad Stevens, I think he's had a good run in Boston, but I would replace him. If you trade Kemba Walker, I think you're going to have to remake the team.
Yeah.
I mean, the only untouchable there is Jason Tatum. I think I would probably move a lot of that other talent. I mean, now they're a playoff team. They're going to be in the play-in tournament, I think. Because I think Miami's finally playing better basketball. But the team at the bottom of the East that you should be terrified about is the Washington Wizards because they're going to be in the playoffs. They're going to be in one of those play-in games, and right now it's going to be Boston versus Washington. I think I'd actually go Washington with that.
Yeah, the Washington is the classic bracket buster if there ever was one. A bad team who's snuck into the postseason, riding high, has all the momentum.
Yeah.
Nobody's saying they're going to do big things, and then all of a sudden they knock you out.
Well, and I think one of the things that's really interesting is look at who's out of the playoffs in the East. You're looking at Toronto, who we saw the other night here in Salt Lake. I mean, they're just in shambles with injuries.
Mm-hmm.
You look at the Chicago Bulls without Zach LaVine. I think it feels like it's been about a month.
Yeah.
It's had to be 8-10 games. Without him, Vucevic didn't play last night. You just look at the bottom of the East. Washington all of a sudden has become this very dangerous basketball team with Bradley Beal and Russell Westbrook dominating, and you're getting really good performances out of other guys on that roster, and I think they're going to be a handful. I would not want to be Brad Stevens trying to figure out how to beat Washington.
Yeah.
Because
that's not good.
I think that's a very difficult thing to navigate. Swiderski says Celtics, season of pain.
Yeah, man, that's all it is, dude. They're just kind of grinding through it.
Yep, Jordan McDonald, good morning to you. He says Suns Jazz could realistically make the finals. This could be the best playoff in years. Anyone can win it. Totally agree.
Yeah, I think the West is where it's at. Like, I love, everybody makes the joke that I like to slurp Kevin Durant, and I do. I love Kevin Durant, but I'm not a Nets fan per se. They are a fun team to watch, but I'm not. The Nets haven't done enough for me to be like, man, I really I'm into this team. Like, I love Kevin Durant, but other than that in the East, there's really not. My only question is who's going to the.
Not compelling.
Yeah, okay, cool. So Like, for me, it's like, all right, I'm into the West. I love the West, the Jazz, the Suns, the Lakers, the Clippers, like all these teams that are just compelling as hell. And then you've got the East where you're like, all right, I don't really care about the East. Just tell me who's going to be in the finals, and we'll battle it out in the West.
That's it.
Like, that's all it is, man.
Yeah, I don't find Milwaukee. Look, it's probably because I grew up in Chicago, but fuck Milwaukee. Like I don't
Whatever.
like, excuse my French. I just don't care. Like Milwaukee is uninteresting to me. You know what I mean? Like, and I try not to curse on this show, but it's why I don't care about Aaron Rodgers, who we're going to talk about in a minute. But I just like Milwaukee's not interesting. I would love to see a Phoenix Utah Western Conference Finals for the NBA championship.
Yeah.
But if the Nets get to the finals,
Ugh.
there's nobody in the West that's beating the Nets.
Yeah.
I mean, if James Harden ever comes back from his labial fold tear, I think that
It is what it is.
I mean, that's his ham in his buttocks. Anyway, the point is, if Harden ever gets healthy again, ever, and those three play together, it'd be a miracle. I think without Harden, they don't win a championship.
Yeah.
I think Harden and KD together, they win a championship.
Harden and KD together, they're a championship team. Kyrie and KD together, I don't know.
Jordan McDonald says Nets Milwaukee would be an amazing series. Actually, it would. That's true. Ian says the Google ad lady is going to be mad about that. Yes, she is.